They say the sea in Alexandria hides many secrets, but some are buried not beneath the waves, they're buried under the floor. It was 1919, a turbulent time in Alexandria, Egypt. The city was still recovering from the chaos of war and colonial rule. The streets were crowded with soldiers, merchants, and thieves. Poverty was everywhere, and desperation hung heavy in the air. In a narrow alley of Laban district, far from the golden coastlines and European cafes, stood a small, decaying house. Its windows cracked, its door crooked, and a faint smell of smoke always seeping through the walls. This was the home of Raya and Sakina Hamam, two sisters, born into hardship. They had lived through hunger, sickness, and the death of children. And in that darkness, something inside them had withered, replaced by greed, by bitterness, by something inhuman. Women began to vanish, one, then another, then another. They weren't rich, just ordinary working women, dancers, traders, widows. Each of them was last seen laughing, walking arm in arm with Raya or Sakina through the bustling market streets. And then, gone. At first, no one questioned it. It was a chaotic time. People left for Cairo, or fled debts, or simply disappeared into the city's underbelly. But weeks turned into months, and whispers began. "Did you hear about Fatma?" She was seen with Sakina the day she vanished. And Zara, too, the same story. The pattern was clear, but no one dared to confront the sisters. Raya had a sharp tongue, Sakina had a temper, and both had husbands who worked in the shadows of the city's nightlife. At night, when the rest of the neighborhood slept, faint lights flickered through the cracks of the sisters' windows. Inside, the air was thick, filled with the smell of kerosene, alcohol, and dust. Raya's husband, Hasabala, and Sakina's husband, Abdel Aal, sat silently, waiting. Raya would pace back and forth, muttering to herself, "One more, Sakina, just one more and we'll have enough." Sakina would nod nervously, biting her lip. "She's coming, tomorrow. I promised her tea and new earrings." And so, the trap was set. The next day, a woman would arrive, smiling, unsuspecting. The sisters would welcome her warmly, pour her tea, talk and laugh, until the moment came. Sakina would quietly lock the door. Hasabala would approach from behind, a scarf in his hand. The struggle was short. Sometimes the victims screamed, sometimes they didn't have time. When it was over, the sisters would roll up the rug and dig. Beneath that very floor, beneath their own feet, they buried the body. Then the rug went back, and by morning they were in the market selling the victims' jewelry. By the late 1920s, the streets of Alexandria had changed. People stopped going out after dark. Women clutched their purses tighter. And yet Raya and Sakina still smiled, still laughed, still blended in. Their neighbors noticed strange things. The sisters are burning incense every night. Mud is being brought into the house for no reason, and a constant smell, something foul, metallic, and sweet. But fear silenced everyone. In those days, nobody wanted to get involved. Then came Inspector Ibrahim Pasha Fahmy, a quiet man who didn't believe in superstition. He'd heard rumors, bodies buried under homes, whispers of missing women, and he decided to start digging, both literally and figuratively. One evening, his men broke into the sisters' home. The room was small and dark, the air stale. He ordered the floorboards removed. At first, nothing but dirt. Then, One of the men gagged and turned pale. A foul stench filled the air. They dug deeper, and there it was, a skull. A woman's hair still clinging to the bone. Then another, and another. 17 bodies in total. 17 women are buried beneath one roof. The entire city erupted in horror. Crowds gathered outside the police station demanding justice. Raya and Sakina were dragged in, screaming, denying, spitting curses. Their husbands followed, heads hung low. Under interrogation, the truth began to spill out. Sakina broke first, trembling, crying, begging for mercy. "It wasn't my idea," she sobbed. "Raya said they had gold. She said no one would miss them." But Raya sat in silence. Her face was calm, almost cold. When the inspector pressed her, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "We didn't kill angels. We killed greedy women. We did what we had to do, to live." Even the hardened officers said her tone sent chills down their spines. There was no fear, no regret, just emptiness. The trial drew massive crowds. People shouted outside the courthouse, calling the sisters demons, witches, monsters. Inside, the sisters sat motionless. When the verdict was announced, death by hanging, Sakina collapsed, screaming for forgiveness. But Raya only smirked. "We'll see you all soon enough," she said quietly. "Death comes for everyone." On December 21st, 1921, Raya and Sakina were led to the gallows, the first woman ever executed in modern Egyptian history. Their husbands followed. Witnesses said Raya went first, her eyes burning with defiance until the rope snapped tight. After that day, no one dared enter their house again. But strange stories began to spread. Tenants who later lived there claimed they'd hear scratching beneath the floorboards, soft voices whispering in the dark, and footsteps pacing back and forth long after midnight. Some swore they'd seen two women standing by the window, one short, one tall, both smiling in the moonlight. Even now, over a century later, older Alexandrians still cross the street when they pass that house, because they say if you stop and listen, you can still hear them. "Sakina, bring the shovel." "Quiet, Raya. Someone might hear." In times of hunger and desperation, monsters aren't born, they're made. But the line between survival and evil is thin, and sometimes it runs right beneath your floor. There are places on this earth where silence itself feels alive. In the southern reaches of the Arabian Peninsula, beyond the reach of roads, beyond even the reach of faith, lies a desert so vast, so empty, that Bedouins once said even the wind refuses to cross it. They call it Rub al Khali, the empty quarter. And among the dunes that shift like oceans, there are stories whispered in fear. Stories of travelers who never returned, and of voices that call your name from the sand. The empty quarter spans over 500,000 square kilometers across Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, and Yemen. It is one of the most inhospitable places on earth. Endless dunes rising like waves of molten gold, reaching heights of nearly 250 meters. Temperatures can exceed 50 degrees Celsius, and for centuries, Bedouin tribes treated it as a cursed land. They would say, "The empty quarter does not forgive trespassers." In the early 1980s, Saudi Arabia began surveying remote desert regions for oil exploration. Among the expeditions was a small team of 5 men, 2 geologists, 1 local guide, a driver, and a radio operator, led by an American scientist named Dr. Robert Kane, who had been studying shifting sand structures. Their mission was simple: collect soil samples from an area south of Sheba. What they found instead became one of the most disturbing unsolved disappearances in modern Arabian history. According to official records, the expedition left Sheba on June 11, 1983. They carried 3 jeeps, a week's supply of water, and a satellite transmitter. They were expected back in 5 days. On the 3rd day, the radio logs recorded something unusual. At 2:43 a.m., the operator transmitted a single, fragmented message. "Light. Can't tell if it's moving. Tell Dr. Kane." The transmission cut out. The next day, the search team discovered one of their jeeps partially buried in sand. The tires were melted, as if they had been exposed to extreme heat. There were no footprints around it. Nearby, the Bedouin guide, Saleh al-Dosari, was found kneeling in the sand, dead, his eyes wide open, his hands pressed together as if in prayer. The coroner later noted that his pupils were dilated as though he died seeing something that terrified him beyond reason. The rest of the team was missing. 2 weeks later, a second team was dispatched with helicopters and ground vehicles. They followed the coordinates last transmitted from Kane's camp, deep inside a stretch of dunes known to the tribes as Qasr al-Nar, meaning the Palace of Fire. At dawn, one of the pilots reported seeing a circle of blackened sand, perfectly round, like glass melted by lightning. In the center stood what looked like a man-made structure. When they landed, the team discovered the remnants of stone pillars, ancient, buried deep beneath the dunes, now partially exposed. Some said it resembled the ruins of Iram, the legendary city of pillars mentioned in the Quran, the city that God destroyed for its pride. Inside the ruin, searchers found a torn journal belonging to Dr. Kane. Most of it was unreadable, but one passage, later leaked through a local journalist, read, "The guide refuses to go near the ruins, says they belong to them. Last night, I heard chanting outside the tent. Not human. Low. Rhythmic. Saleh insists we keep the fire burning till sunrise. The sand moves at night. I swear it does." That same day, a sandstorm struck the search camp. One of the helicopters was destroyed. When the storm cleared, the ruins had disappeared beneath the dunes again, as if swallowed by the desert itself. The Saudi government later issued a short report. Expedition lost due to environmental conditions. No mention of ruins, no mention of bodies. Only Saleh's corpse was ever recovered. But locals near Sheba still remember that summer. They tell of strange lights that appeared over the dunes for 3 nights after the storm, bluish-white, like flames suspended in the air. Bedouin elders warned oil workers to stay away from that sector, calling it Ard al-Majnoon, the land of the possessed. In 1988, a French documentary team attempted to retrace the lost expedition's route. They reached nearly the same coordinates before turning back. In their footage, one of the crew members can be heard whispering, "The wind is whispering my name." He quit filmmaking shortly after and never spoke publicly again. Satellite imagery from 2004 briefly showed unusual geometric patterns in that same region, almost like foundations buried beneath the sand. The images were quietly removed a few months later. Today, no official expedition has returned. Only smugglers and Bedouin nomads occasionally pass nearby. And even they say their camels refuse to move once they reach a certain line of dunes.
One of the last recorded testimonies came from a driver named Fahad, who worked with a gas company in 2010. In an interview, he recalled camping near the southern edge of Rub al Khali. At night, I woke up because someone was knocking on the truck window. I saw a face, pale, covered in dust, but smiling. When I stepped out, there were no footprints in the sand, only the sound of something breathing right next to me. He resigned the next day and never went back. The desert keeps its secrets well, and somewhere beneath the endless dunes of the empty quarter, 5 men, and whatever they awakened, are still waiting for the wind to whisper their names again.